I probably shouldn't have picked an hour-and-a-half long documentary as the first review, but I think I was able to do a good job regardless.
You thought an hour and a half was bad? Try almost 7 hours. Why did I think this would be a good documentary to review next? Hello everyone, my name is Peyton, and today I am taking a look at Netflix's Life on Our Planet. As of writing this, it has been almost a year since we first saw the original teaser trailer for this documentary, and I was ecstatic. The paleo community was still on the high caused by Prehistoric Planet, so getting a trailer of another seemingly high-budget dinosaur documentary, directed by Steven Spielberg, and that wasn't on an obscure streaming service that no one had heard about, got everyone excited. So, like I do whenever I see something online that I want to see or purchase, I immediately ran to my calendar, marked down its release date, and patiently waited for it to come out. So when October 25th, 2023 finally rolled around, I didn't watch it. Which was odd. Any other time there was something I wanted to watch on a streaming service I would watch it immediately. But for some reason, I never did. And it's not like I forgot it existed. I would regularly go on to Netflix, and due to me having watched every other of the surprisingly limited selection of paleo media available on Netflix, it'd always be at the top of my suggested shows. And I'd just be like, oh yeah, Life on Our Planet released. I should really get around to watching it. But first I need to rewatch Dragon's Race to the Edge for the 37th time. I don't know, there was just something putting me off from watching it. And it didn't help that there were a total of 3 people on YouTube talking about it. So eventually it just kind of faded from my mind for months. That was until one day I ran into a friend of mine who needed me to answer a question for them. He wanted to know the validity of a documentary he had seen, because in it they had called a mosasaur-like creature a plesiosaur. For context, his favorite extinct animals are plesiosaurs, so I understand why he was confused by something that looks nothing like what he thought a plesiosaur was being called one. After asking for some more details, I was able to determine he was talking about a pliosaur instead of a mosasaur, where I then informed him that while pliosaurs are a part of Plesiosauria, there are 2 separate morphological groups within Plesiosauria, the plesiosauromorphs, which include the classic plesiosaur look, and the pliosauromorphs, which include pliosaurs. While it is technically not wrong to call a pliosaur a plesiosaur, it is very unprofessional of a documentary whose sole goal is to educate the audience to not put in the proper legwork to explain this very important topic to those who did not already go in with this background information, and will only result in confusing the viewer if not elaborated on, forcing them to waste their own time doing research themselves or asking someone who is more knowledgeable on something that should have been explained by the documentary which people originally watched in order to gain a better understanding of prehistory. Wait, which documentary did you say this was from again? It was called something like Life on Our Planet. Oh, that documentary! You've seen it? No, actually, I've been meaning to watch it. In fact, I don't know why I haven't already watched it. It's been months since it released. Huh. You know, I'll get back to you. I need to watch this thing first before I can judge its quality. So when I got home, curious to see what this documentary was actually like, and finally got around to watching it. Also, the deadline for voting in the 2023 Dromies was running out, in which a fifth of the questions were dedicated to this documentary, so in order to give my honest votes, I had to first watch the damn thing. And let me just say, calling a pliosaur a plesiosaur is the least of this series' problems. This show's a mess. It ranges from having some of the best, most unique takes on certain prehistoric animals to being laughably absurd. It's all over the place. Not to mention that less than half the runtime is actually dedicated to prehistory. Yeah, no, that's right. This documentary, which was marketed as the next big paleo series after Prehistoric Planet, only covers prehistoric animals for less than half the total runtime, with the other half being the camera crew filming coatis and praying to God that the sound editors are competent enough to remove the ear-piercing sounds of the nearby farmer cutting down the rainforest to make room for his cows in post. And what it results in is a documentary that I cannot fully cover in my regular format, both because there's just too much to talk about in one video, but also because I just don't want to talk about it. This documentary doesn't deserve to be rewatching it 3 times in order to write the script and record footage, and if I did, it would result in a review almost as long as the show itself. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to cover any segment focused on modern day, as this documentary was originally marketed as a paleo doc, and I think the prehistoric segments are really the only things worth covering in this review. And let's be honest, they're the only reason you're watching this video to begin with. And I'm only going to talk about the aspects of the show that are either truly horrendous or actually good, as there's really no point talking about the mediocre or boring segments. If it isn't noteworthy or couldn't be seen in a better documentary, I'm not covering it. Oh, also, I won't cover the mass extinction scenes, so let me just say that they're all really good. In fact, if the documentary was entirely about them, it probably would have been better off for it. And it was refreshing seeing culprits for extinction events that weren't comets. When dinosaurs roamed America. With that being said, let's see if Netflix's / Steven Spielberg's Emmy-nominated documentary, no really, apparently this garbage was nominated for an Emmy, is worth watching. Spoilers, it isn't. This is Life on Our Planet. Episode 1. Also, no, I'm not going to be using their actual names. I can't be bothered to remember them, and let's be honest, you don't remember them either. I'm also barely going to be talking about this episode because it's just a pointless introduction. There are only 3 things worth mentioning here, all of which actually harm the show rather than add to it. 1. We see an unnamed terror bird get easily taken down by a Smilodon. Wow, not even a full episode in, I already want to shoot myself. 1. Terror birds were not outcompeted by mammalian predators, which was an idea I thought had died in the 2000s, yet here we are still dealing with it in 2023. 2. Assuming that this unnamed terror bird is Titanus, one of the only terror birds that actually lived alongside Smilodon, then that would mean that this is supposed to be Smilodon gracilis, which not only could not even dream of taking on a Titanus, but also means that the Smilodon in this show are oversized, as S. gracilis barely grew taller than Titanus's knees. This is also a part of another big problem with this show, that being the obsession with the idea of new, more evolved species taking over as rulers of the Earth and killing the lesser creatures into extinction, which is a terrible and overused interpretation of evolution. People seem to think that because humans were the sole reason all the Ice Age megafauna went extinct, that every other time creatures went extinct it was because of a similar situation, which is especially funny to remember that humans weren't the sole reason Ice Age megafauna went extinct. However, it's generally rare for just a single factor or species to cause the extinction of another group. Throughout prehistory, many creatures of various groups hold niches in every ecosystem, and it's foolish to think that there is ever a point in the planet's history where one group was the sole ruler of the planet, unless you go all the way back to the Precambrian primordial soup. And this documentary is not subtle about this. Whenever a new dynasty, which is a word this show uses a lot, appears, it's generally followed by a scene of the previous dynasty being killed by the current one. A cephalopod eating an arthropod, a fish eating a cephalopod, an amphibian eating a fish, etc. I don't know, I just thought we would have moved past the Walking with Monsters format by 2023, but apparently not. 2. We see Maiasaura, which looks amazing. Legitimately, one of the best Maiasaura designs I've seen in anything. But Peyton, you said you only had bad things to say about this episode. Put a pin in that, I'll be coming back to this point later. 3. This documentary reuses the design of the Triceratops from Jurassic World, which, why? Of all the creatures to reuse, you picked one of the worst ones. This design is so ugly, and worst of all, it's inaccurate. In hindsight, I realized that in my When Dinosaurs Roamed America review, I went in depth talking about pronated wrists and theropods, a concept that is generally well known even by people who aren't as hyper-obsessed with accuracy as I am. Meanwhile, I used the far more obscure term elephantine feet a bunch and didn't explain it at all, so allow me to correct that mistake. Elephantine feet is a term used to describe when a piece of paleomedia opts to, instead of actually designing the feet of a prehistoric animal to look like what the fossils show they looked like, they instead give them generic elephant-like feet. Why am I bringing this up? Because the Jurassic World Triceratops, and by extension the Life on Our Planet Triceratops, has elephantine feet. It also is depicted with epoccipitals along the frill in the adults, and again suffers from being sinfully ugly. I'm so sorry When Dinosaurs Roamed America, Allosaurus. I was way too mean to you. I didn't realize how bad it was going to get. Episode 2, aka the true first episode. Alright, immediately I need to say that I hate that this documentary only tells us the date, not the location, as it makes it really difficult to determine the exact identities of the unnamed species, which trust me there are a lot more of. Hell, half the time we're relying on Morgan Freeman to tell us what time period we're in, which he only does half the time to begin with. Shoot, I forgot to talk about Morgan Freeman. He does a fine job narrating. It's not his best, but can you blame him? He was 86 when he did this. We see both trilobites and anomalocars, which both look excellent. However, anomalocars is depicted hunting hard-shelled organisms like trilobites, when modern studies show that it actually fed on soft-bodied organisms instead. We jump ahead a bit to see a new type of trilobite. I'm actually shocked they went through the effort of making a new design. I wouldn't have batted an eye if they had just reused the one from the Cambrian segment, but I appreciate it. Gee, I hope all the future creature designs get just as much love as this frickin' trilobite. We also see Camarasaurus, whose design is incredible. With them we see a great scene of Camarasaurus hunting a trilobite. I also love the detail of algae growing on the Camarasaurus' shell. It's such a small detail, but it goes miles to make me believe we're really looking at these creatures. I guess there's no better time to mention, but the visuals range from breathtakingly realistic to pretty good. Like, some shots are photorealistic, and others look good, but more like something out of the 2010s rather than 2023. But in general, I'd say that the visuals are great. We then see an unshrunk dunk. Okay, I'm actually giving this show a pass because this series came out / was in production around the same time the new study on Dunkleosteus' true size, so it's not fair to really judge this documentary for something they couldn't have known until the show was already near completion. Then again, I and almost every other paleo media reviewer on this site mock documentaries for being scientifically outdated compared to modern science, despite these findings not existing when the shows were made. So, how dare this documentary not be able to look into the future and see what Dunkleosteus' true size was? What incompetent fool was responsible for this? But yeah, otherwise this segment's fine. You can definitely tell it was made by the same man who made Jaws, but otherwise there's really nothing noteworthy here. Okay, nice visuals to show that the land is covered in plants now, but don't think I wouldn't notice the grass. Come on guys, this isn't the 2000s anymore. You can't get away with missing these key details. Episode 3, aka the best one. And no, I'm not salty this lost the Dromie to Episode 2. Episode 2 is a fine episode, I just prefer this one personally. We start off with my favorite segment in the entire documentary. While I agree with the general consensus that the Smilodon and Datacura scene is one of the best scenes, and it is incredible, I just love the Arthropleura courtship scene. We get to see a side to Arthropleura that we've never seen before in a documentary. No longer is it an aggressive, territorial creature like in past depictions. Here it's mostly blind, just going about its life, looking for a mate. The scene is beautifully shot, the pacing is surprisingly good compared to the other segments like it, and it's weirdly comedic, but in a good way that doesn't take you out of the scene. It's my favorite segment in this documentary, and nothing will change my mind about that. Next, we see some unnamed lobed fish crawl onto land where they... Now, let me tell you how this scene does a better job subverting expectations than the plesiosaur scene. But Peyton, you haven't gotten there yet. Yeah, because after this rant, I'll have already talked about that scene in detail twice, which is 10 times more than it deserves to be talked about in the first place. Anyways, what this scene does better is that it actually explains what's going on after the scene is complete. New-time viewers will be watching this scene thinking these were the first fish ever to crawl onto land, and would lead to the evolution of all land vertebrates, only to have the carpet ripped out from underneath their feet as it's revealed amphibians are already there, and while the audience is still shocked and confused, Morgan Freeman goes to tell the viewers that amphibians have already been living on land for millions of years beforehand. It shows the audience something they're probably already familiar with, then subverts their expectations, then uses that subversion to educate the audience. Meanwhile, in the pliosaur scene, Morgan Freeman's just like, "Hey, you see that? That's a plesiosaur." Deal with it. Parents, don't let your children grow up to be a life on our planet pliosaur. Inspire and support them so they can become the life on our planet anthracosaurus we know they're capable of being. Step number 1, don't give your kids unrestricted access to the internet. Okay, admittedly the scene is a lot less effective on someone like me who already knows that the first amphibians evolved back in the Devonian, or anyone who was spoiled by the original teaser trailer, but it was still a good attempt regardless. Next we see Scutosaurus with a truly excellent design, much better than some other Scutosaurus designs I've seen. They are also being hunted by the truly immaculate Gorgonopsid. I adore Gorgonopsids, and this is probably the best design of any Gorgonopsid in anything. However, this show's insistence to not tell us what species are actually on display is driving me nuts. As I've already let on, a lot of the creatures in this show aren't ever properly named, making it very difficult to actually assess their accuracy to their real-life counterparts. And them not telling us where each segment is set doesn't help in that matter. Now sure, I could look up what species is supposed to be represented, but like the pliosaur, I shouldn't have to do extra homework after watching a documentary that was supposed to be educational. But as a Gorgonopsid design in general, it's truly fantastic. Episode 4. Christ, I'm less than halfway through this. Why do I do this to myself? Thankfully, I have a lot less to say for every episode after this, because instead of having a bunch of really good segments with only a handful of bad or inaccurate elements like the last two, this is where the show really starts to take a nosedive. We see that after the Great Dying, Lystrosaurus became the dominant species, before being killed off by new predators. Where do I begin with this? First of all, the Eurythosuchus's legs aren't in the right position. They should be directly under its body, similar to dinosaurs, not sprawling to the sides like lizards. Second, Lystrosaurus wasn't the fricking dodo of its time. It had predators, lots of predators in fact, and Dicynodonts didn't go extinct until they were outcompeted by dinosaurs for the role of dominant herbivores. This scene is stupid and only exists to make people feel sad that the baby Lystosauruses are now dead. Buddy, I've sat through Walking with Beasts. I've seen ants eat a newly hatched baby bird to the bone. I've seen a montage of a Basilosaurus murking baby Dorodons. I've seen the severed head of a baby Smilodon, and you expect me to be impressed with this cheap attempt to make me feel something? Try as hard as you must, but deep down, you know you will never meet the baby murdering highs of Walking with Beasts. Wait. And yeah, that's kinda all I have to say about this episode. I mean, we briefly see my boy Pliosaurus, a dinosaur that really needs to be in more media, but otherwise there's nothing else to talk about, really. Moving on. Episode 5. We then see— oh god, not more ugly Jurassic World designs, Jesus! I don't understand. There are plenty of good-looking Jurassic World dinosaurs. Why do you keep using the ugly ones? Alright then, where's the utterly hideous Jurassic World Stegosaurus? We need to complete the set. Actually, we do see another reused model in the Allosaurus, but this one I'm a little more torn about. On the one hand, it is inaccurate. On the other hand, it's one of the Jurassic World designs that looks cool instead of ugly. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't like it when dinosaurs are depicted as awesome bro in documentaries either, but I'd rather cool-looking designs to designs that make me envy the Arthropleura for being blind. I was originally going to skip the next scene with the Deinonychus and Archosaurus, as while the baby Deinonychus are cute, the scene didn't seem worth mentioning. That wasn't until I saw this shot of the Archosaurus's head, where I actually can't tell if they used a physical prop or not. That's how good the special effects are. I genuinely can't tell if this was rendered or a puppet, and that with the beautiful colors resulted in maybe my favorite ornithomimid design in anything. Must resist using motherfucking T-Rex song. And actually, I don't know what it is, but something seems kind of off about this T-Rex design. I can't put my finger on it, it just feels off. Anyways, KPG, mass extinction time, baby, let's go! Episode 6. Also, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about any of the mass extinction scenes, but there is almost nothing else for me to talk about here. I mean, we briefly see Achiornis and Sinraptor. One looks good, and the other's another reuse of the Jurassic World Allosaurus model. But really, I don't have much to say about this scene.
I'm flying! Nope, still can't fly!
You can't be serious! No, I refuse to believe this is a joke. This is a fucking joke. Reusing designs from Jurassic World was one thing, but now you're slightly editing footage from the previous episode and trying to pass it off as something new? Go to hell, documentary! You know that pin I told you to put in when I was talking about how amazing the Maiasaur design was a bad thing? Well, the reason is that if they had just not included the Maiasaur scene at all, sure, the Edmontosaurus design would still be a joke, but at least it wouldn't have looked like they had just reused the footage. Where did the budget go? From this point on, not only do we see far more reused footage and models, but the new stuff we get looks far worse than what came before. Want any more proof that they ran out of money? They reused the pliosaur design to show how the oceans were affected by the extinction event. One problem though, pliosaurs went extinct long before the KPG mass extinction. I'm sorry, are those Alamosaurus galloping away from a tsunami? Sauropods can barely speed walk. You expect me to believe they could gallop? This is becoming a comedy. We also see a Triceratops burn in a forest fire. Why am I suddenly getting flashbacks? And yeah, that's kinda it for this episode. I wasn't lying when I said I had a lot less positive things, or really less things to say in general as the show goes on. Episode 7. We get the previously mentioned Smilodon and Datacura scene, which, yeah, is amazing. It's cool seeing a big cat act like, well, a cat. But everyone talks about how original and unique this scene is, when I'd like to remind everyone that there is a very similar, though not nearly as good, scene in Walking with Beasts, so it isn't that original. Not like there was a scene in this documentary that is truly like nothing we've ever seen before for the creature it focuses on, or like anything in any other documentary before it. Peyton, are you just salty that the Arthropleura courtship scene lost the Dromie by 4% to this scene?
Fuck you!
But yeah, this scene is still great. We then see Maiacetus, which is cool to see, but probably has the worst CGI of the entire show. That is to say, it's good, but not photorealistic like a lot of the other scenes. Okay, come on, Peyton, you're in the home stretch now, you can do this. Episode 8. We see cave lions, which are oddly given a white coat similar to in Walking with Beasts. We actually have fossil evidence telling us what they actually looked like, so this is either inaccurate speculation or a direct homage to Walking with Beasts. The cave lions then go on to try and hunt a baby mammoth. However, the herd is able to keep the predators at bay until... Bullshit! A single cave lion wouldn't be able to take down a teenage mammoth so easily, let alone bring it crashing to the ground. I could go into the specifics as why this is stupid, but look at it! I shouldn't have to explain how dumb this is! What's the point of them hunting in a pride when clearly one is enough to do the job? Moving on. Oh wait, never mind. This is like the only scene involving prehistoric animals. Wait. Does this mean I'm done? I'm free! I'm finally free! Yes! Oh, yes! So that was life on our planet. And God, it was awful. Ignoring the many scientific inaccuracies, it just isn't entertaining for most of the runtime. Especially on my second watch. Scenes that had me laughing on the floor from how bad they were on my first watch just kinda angered me in my second. And while there are a bunch of excellent segments, there are nearly just as many terrible ones, to the point I'd personally say that the bad outweighs the good. I would not recommend this series. It's an overly long, messy, and in general disappointing show. If for some reason you do still want to watch this after watching my video, I would personally only recommend you watch episodes 2 and 3, and then the Smilodon and Datacura scene in episode 7. I'm giving this show a 4 out of 10. I want to give it a 3, but I think this documentary's good qualities are just enough to bump it up one placement. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video. But until then, I need to take a nap. God, this show was draining. Deja vu, I've just been in this place before.